Hello, my name is Miss Amber, and I'm here with your English 11A reading selection resources. Today, we are going to get started on the third lesson of Unit 1, which is Colonial Literature. And there's kind of a lot to cover, so we're just going to hop right in. Just as a reminder, this series is for students that are having a rough time getting through the reading selections. I'll be reading through some of the materials and offering some help with vocabulary, with summarizing some of the sections, um, and trying to help with just bridging that gap between some of the language that you see in the reading selections and your understanding of it. So we're going to hop right into colonial literature. I'm going to share my screen. Now, if you're watching this video, myself up right here, if you are watching this video, you should have already at least looked at this tutorial once. This is the colonial literature tutorial. It is the third lesson in Unit 1, and it basically gives you a poem and some other text that gives you an idea of how people wrote during the colonial era. There's some information that you have to get about like history and what was happening at the time first. Um, but also, we're starting on slide 6 here because there is a knowledge article that gives you vital information for understanding how people phrase things at this time. Now, this slide 6, gives you a little bit of that background. It says a passionate interest in religion and salvation developed in the American colonies. Now, if you remember, a lot of the people who first colonized the US or North America came from basically being chased out of England. There was a lot of back and forth there between whether or not people wanted to be Catholic or Protestant, which is kind of like the precursor to what we would consider modern Christianity. It broke off from Catholicism, and as a result, the back and forth pushed a lot of people away. Some people didn't want to be involved in all of the religious battling back and forth, and quite a few of them decided that they would help to colonize the Americas as a result of that. So there's a lot of religion in their literature because the people who were here first were, in fact, religious people. And because of that, this slide wants to make sure that you know that preachers and missionaries, which were a lot of the people who were in the colonies at the time, they focused on capturing emotions instead of the intellect or knowledge of an audience to get their message across. And they give you a knowledge article here at the bottom to show you more about the emotional appeals and persuasive techniques that are used. So appeals is a word that just means that you are trying to figure out how to hook someone in to convince them of something. So an emotional appeal is when you use emotions to do that. And other persuasive techniques, persuasive just means to convince someone in general. So persuasive techniques are just techniques that people use to convince people to listen to what they're saying or believe what they are saying. This knowledge article is actually important because there's a lot of different types of logic and reasoning that people can use in their writing and in their speech to try to convince you to come around to an idea or to consider their plan of action if they want you to do something. And it's important for you to be able to pick out what techniques are being used so that you have a better idea overall over whether or not this just sounds good or if it actually makes sense. So we're going to click here on this blue link for the knowledge article and open it up. And we're going to review it first, just because some of the reading selections in this, tutorial require you to be able to go through and tell which sections are using what kind of appeal. Some of the mastery tests that you take on this lesson are also going to ask you these same things. They're going to ask you to read a section and then say, what type of appeal is this? So starting here with the knowledge article at the top, they give you a concept connection. So they're asking you to make sure that you look at these couple things at the top before you read the rest of the article so that you know what it is they're talking about. They give you the definition of a claim. A claim is an assertion. The word assertion means to put something forward. So it's putting an idea forward in this case. So you are asserting or putting an idea forward that an author asks the reader to accept. So basically, when you make a point and you say, I think this statement is true, you are asserting a claim. A claim is an idea or a statement that you put forward for other people to consider. And in writing, it usually means that you're asking the reader to consider the truth of what you are saying. So connotation is the second one. Connotation, this is from way back in English 9A. If for those of you who have been with us for a while, you may remember this. But there are two different types of definitions for words. There's connotation and denotation. Denotation starts with the same letter. It starts with a D. It starts with the same letter as dictionary. Denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. You can go look it up, and this is what it'll say. The connotation, which is what we're looking at here, they define it here as the implied meaning of a word or expression apart from its primary meaning. So when they say primary, they mean dictionary definition. Primary means first meaning. So it's the implied meaning of a word that's separate from the first meaning, meaning how it is in the dictionary. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, think about how certain words make you feel, right? There's a difference between the definition of a word that you find in a dictionary and how some people use certain words. I'm sure you've noticed that certain people can use words to mean positive or negative things. And that's what connotation is referring to. It's the feeling that a word gives you that gives you the full meaning when you combine it with the dictionary definition. So examples that'll actually help bridge that would be, for example, if you're talking about someone who saves money or keeps money to themselves, right? If you want to say something positive about them, you might call them frugal. Frugal is someone that doesn't spend a lot of money and that watches what they spend their money on. But if you wanted to imply that it is a bad thing, that maybe they're being selfish with how they keep their money, you could call them stingy, for example. Someone that keeps their things and doesn't share even when it might benefit them or other people, right? If you call someone frugal, it basically just means that they're smart and they know how to save. That's the feeling that comes from that word, even if someone who's stingy and someone who is frugal points to the same behavior, the words feel different. When someone calls you stingy, even the way they say it kind of implies that it's not a great thing. And the connotation for different words kind of work that way. There are some words that are considered to be positive or good, and other words that are considered to be like bad or negative, depending on how a person says them or which word they use to describe what it is they're describing. So it's important when you're looking at different arguments to pay attention to the specific words that are used, because sometimes people will use words that imply that you or others are bad or not doing the right thing to give you the idea that something they're expressing is bad and you shouldn't be doing it. Okay, now that we're past these two things, they talk about here, just as an intro, logical, emotional, and ethical appeals. And these are the three types of appeals that can be used in persuasive text. Logical means using facts with evidence. Emotional means using examples with real world stories, or details that tend to make you feel a certain way towards an issue. And ethical has to do with appealing to what people feel is right or just, or also appealing to like the authority of what people trust in. Now, usually when we say people trusting in things, we're talking about trust in the way that people should act or behave. But sometimes it also means appealing to people via other people that they trust. So ethical appeals can also show up by you pointing at individuals who are known to be like leaders or famous for certain things. And if people trust that person, they might trust an argument that comes from that person or that is related to that person. So now that we've gotten those three things out of the way, logical, emotional, and ethical, this knowledge article is going to focus on logical, so that's facts and evidence, and emotional or pathos. So they give you these two words here, and these are the older words, like the old Greek words that refers to these things. Logos starts with the same letter as logic. It's easy to associate them. Logic, logos, very easy. Pathos is a little harder. So pathos means emotional appeal. When I was younger, I had a rough time with actually remembering this. So what I do to try to remember that pathos is associated with emotion is that pathos starts with P. It is the same first letter as passion. And if you're passionate about something, you are emotional about it. So pathos equals passion equals emotion. And that's how I remembered that. So the first half of this article talks about logical appeals. And the first thing they tell you is that these are fact-based arguments. They use reasoning and clear evidence to persuade an audience. So you're using things that have been proven to be true and evidence about those things being supported by study or by tests that have been run over and over. You're basically giving facts, numbers, things that can be shown in scientific journals and that kind of stuff. If presented correctly, the audience should find it difficult to refute or push back on the speaker or writer's claim. And it says here, the different types of logical appeals vary greatly, but they are all based on fact. So there are different approaches you can use for using your facts to create an argument. But the point is that all logical appeals are based on fact, things you can look up, things you can verify. So below is a table of logical appeals. So just summary up to this point, right? We're talking about claims, things that people put forward and want you to believe are true. And we are talking about the types of appeals that are used to make the arguments about these claims being true, right? We're talking about logical appeals right now, but there is also a such thing as emotional appeals. Under the umbrella of logical appeals, there are different types, and we're about to get into them. So looking at these and just going over this table, we have cause and effect appeals, right? And the definition is when you show the relationship between an issue and the proposed solution. So basically, you're presenting it as here's a problem. If we use this solution, then we won't have this problem anymore. Let me prove to you why this will work. And you usually do that with your facts and whatnot. So the example they give you here is everyone should avoid killing spiders that prey on other bugs. Without these spiders, the bug population would be out of control. So this is an example of cause and effect. Something is happening, or we want something to stop happening. And the reason why we want this is because the outcome will be blank. Everyone should avoid killing spiders that prey on other bugs, because if we didn't avoid doing that, meaning that if we did kill a lot of spiders, the bug population would be out of control. What they're saying here is that the fact that there are a lot of spiders is what's keeping the bug population down. So cause and effect. This thing is happening. If we do this, here's the outcome. The second type is compare and contrast. Now, I want to break this down just in case anyone has forgotten or is unsure. When you compare something, it means that you're showing what things have in common. If you are contrasting things, it means you're showing what the difference is between things. And the definition here says, take a statement that is already held true and show how the claim, that means the thing that you want people to consider, is similar to or different from that statement. So you start with something true, and then you take your idea and you say, hey, this is similar to this, so maybe we should do the same thing as we did here in this true statement, or this is different, so we should do something different than what we did for this true statement. So the example they give you here is pretty clear-cut. The sports team program at this school receives $5,000 each year, while the arts program receives $1,200, which is less than 1/4 of what the sports program receives. So this is the fact that they are taking here. These are facts. These are real numbers. This is the amount of money each group gets. So here we get to our claim. Both programs encourage talent and allow students to express themselves outside of the classroom. So this is showing how both of those programs are similar. That's comparing. Why shouldn't both receive the same funding? You see what's happening? They're taking this fact up at the top, and then their claim, which is that they are similar, they're explaining how the two programs are similar, and then moving into their claim, why shouldn't both receive the same funding? If they both do the same thing, the question is, why does one receive less than the other? So this is compare. If you were to do something, for example, a contrast, would be maybe if someone had asked for, like someone from a different department had asked for $5,000 for their program that they feel doesn't, encourage talent or allow students to express themselves, right? A person could ask, why would you give this program money if it's different from these other two? That would be a contrast statement. So just remember, compare is when you're showing that things are alike. A contrast is when you're showing that things are different. And then we have on the next page, a few more left. Give me 1 second. I've got something in my eye. All right, here we go. The next one is inductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning is when you start with a bunch of true statements. So you're leading like breadcrumbs, right, from something very specific, using information that you already have and know that it's true, and develop a claim or something that you think or want to prove is also true from the facts that you've lined up like breadcrumbs, right? So here's the example. In 7 of 10 games this season, our team was losing at halftime. That is one fact. They can look back at the scores and see that that's true, right? So that is a fact. Then we came back to win, right? So that's a second statement that is true. You can actually look at their win-loss record and see that they won these games where they were losing at halftime. And here's the claim. Therefore, I know that we are at our best when we are behind. So they are arguing that because their team is usually losing at halftime but come back to win, that their team plays stronger in the end game than they do in the beginning. And they are asserting that this is true. So see, notice here we've got two facts that you can verify. You can look at the records to see how many games were they losing at halftime, did they win them? And they're saying because these two things are true, I think that this team is best when we're behind. So they're using more than one true statement to develop their claim or idea. The next one is deductive reasoning. So deductive is from the opposite direction. Inductive is when you have a lot of true statements and you're saying, well, if these things are true, then it leads to this conclusion. Deductive is the other way around. You start with a big, broad, wide statement that includes a lot of people or a lot of things. And then you use that to prove a smaller, more specific claim. That's the definition right here. Begin with a general true statement and use it to prove a smaller, more specific claim. So when they say general, they mean speak about people in general. So you start with something wide that includes lots of people, and then you use that to prove a specific claim, something that's been narrowed down. And the example they give you here is recycling programs similar to the one that I've proposed save money for the towns in which they are used. So they're talking about other recycling programs similar to one that they want people to use. And the fact that they've saved money for other towns. So that's a general statement because other towns are one, not the town that this person is in. And two, they're talking about multiple towns, right? So we're grouping a bunch of towns that have recycling programs together. That's what makes this a general statement. And they're saying that because this general statement is true and that it's worked for a lot of other people, that they want people to consider, please consider how such a program would do the same for our town. So they took a true statement that involved a lot of people and then tried to prove this specific claim about how they think it could help their town. And the last one here is definition appeals. Now we know what definitions are. We just talked about that with connotation. You look a word up in the dictionary, right? And you see the definition. So you know it has to do with the definition of words, right? So the definition of a definition appeal is you define the issue in a way that reasonably supports your claim and leads the audience to a logical conclusion. So pretty much what you're doing is you explain the context, you explain the background of what it is you're trying to prove first, so that people understand what you're referring to and what you mean when you say certain things. Then you take your claim, the idea you want to put forward, and make the connection between your claim and the definition to prove that the definition matches what you are saying, and that you can assert whatever it is you think is true. Now, if that sounds confusing, we're going to look at this example. It's a really good example for this, so hopefully that'll clear it up. So this says, what makes a great teacher? So that's what we're defining. We're figuring out the definition of a great teacher, right? It says here, a great teacher encourages, instructs, learns from, and cares for students. So that's the definition they're giving us. They're saying this is what makes a great teacher. And I don't think very many people can deny that all of these things are at least a part of what makes a great teacher. Encourages, instructs, learns from, and cares, right? So then they move on to say, as you will soon see, Mr. Hobart exemplifies each of these characteristics and is truly a great teacher. So the steps, they define what they're trying to prove. What makes a great teacher? Then they tell you, here's what makes a great teacher. So then they take their claim and they're telling you, this person meets that definition that I just laid out, and I'm going to prove it to you, right? So you're using the definition of something to prove that you think your idea is right. That's what a definition appeal is. Different people use words to mean different things. So sometimes it is useful to actually define, here is what this should mean. And because it should mean this other thing that I am saying is true because it meets the requirements of this definition. Now here at the bottom, we have emotional appeals. So emotional appeals appeal to how you are feeling as instead of facts and logic, right? So it says here, emotional appeals, while more difficult to use appropriately and discourage in academic writing, can be just as effective as logical appeals. So they're saying you can move people and convince people based on how they feel just as much as you can with facts and logic. And then they also tell you in this sentence that it's difficult to use appropriately. So it's hard to use emotions in an argument without being manipulative. And it says that it's discouraged in academic writing. So academic just means school related. So if it is discouraged in academic writing, it means that people don't usually use emotional appeals in school writing when you're writing essays, papers, that kind of thing. And then they go on to say, emotional appeals are used to manipulate the audience's values, emotions, and needs and create a bond between the author or speaker and the audience. These appeals may be used to illustrate a point in a more compelling way than could be done by simply stating facts. So they're giving you the reason why people use emotional appeals, even if they're discouraged in academic writing, right? It's because you can use that to create a better point, or at least a stronger point that kind of like tugs at people's heartstrings. So if you give someone a fact, but people don't care about the numbers, or perhaps they're not educated enough to understand what all the numbers mean, using emotions to put things in perspective can help someone understand how important those numbers are. That's why people use emotional appeals in the first place. And then lastly, it says, or emotional appeals, that's what they mean by they, might be used to introduce an argument, which will then be discussed logically and with supporting evidence. So they give you an example. In 2010, there were 425,000 unemployed people in New York City. So this is a fact. They actually pulled this from a report, and it says this factual account of New York's unemployed, while true, may not be very compelling. So maybe a person looks at this number and they just see a number, right? They're not taking a look at what it actually means. They're not visualizing each of those 425,000 people as human beings that do not have jobs, right? So if you want to help someone to consider what this looks like in the everyday life of someone who's unemployed, you could use an emotional appeal. So they give you this second example where they've added an emotional appeal. It says, Edward Jones walks the streets of New York City every day looking for employment. He, along with 425,000 other citizens of New York, face a bleak future. So notice they do give you the statistic. You do get the 425,000 citizens of New York. That is an accurate number. But they use words like bleak to let you know that this is a bad situation. They explain that this one human, it's easier to imagine one person instead of 425,000 of them. They give you the description of him walking the streets looking for a job or employment. It's easier to imagine that than it is to imagine a whole crowd of people, right? So if you imagine that one person, and then you think of it as, oh, well, this one experience times 425,000, it might help a person understand how big the problem of unemployment is in the state of New York. So it says here, personal accounts such as this one might be effective emotional appeals, as long as they are used in conjunction means together, with logic and factual information. So the reason why this is an emotional appeal is because even though this number is here, this 425,000, they're giving you this example here of someone you don't know, someone that is very hard to like verify as like being real, and giving you the picture of someone who's looking for a job every day. So that's definitely something that's supposed to appeal to how you feel about other human beings. And then it says here, on occasion, especially in advertisements or propaganda, people use emotional appeals to distract or frighten the audience. This method is not a sound use of appeals and should be avoided. So they're explaining to you what a bad example is. So up here, we have this good example. They do give you the emotional appeal, but they do actually give you the statistic too. So there's facts being attached together with the emotional appeal. There is something you can actually look up and verify. But in this example, they give you further down, it doesn't have any information at all. So the example is, if you care about your children's success in school, you will invest in this set of encyclopedias, right? This almost feels like a threat. If you care about your child's success in school, right? They don't give you any type of numbers to tell you that it's important. They could say, oh, a student that owns these encyclopedias does X% better on their tests, or having encyclopedias in the home encourage students to read X%, like more. They pretty much just vaguely threaten you with the idea of your child failing. So by saying if you care about your children's success, you'll invest in this set of encyclopedias. What they're implying but not saying is, hey, if you don't buy this, your kid's going to do bad in school, right? And that's what we call like a bad emotional appeal. There's no statistics, no numbers, no facts to back this up. They're just saying something to make you worry because they know that parents worry about their kids and how they do in school. And that's what they tell you down here. This advertisement plays on the fears of parents and may lead them to make an emotionally charged purchase instead of rationally, that means logically, consider their children's true educational needs. They could buy these encyclopedias and their kid could maybe have a hard time with reading. Maybe the encyclopedias don't actually have information that the kids can use for school. You literally never know. And because they haven't given you any facts about the books, what's in them, how often they actually help students, any numbers on people who bought them and didn't regret them, there's no facts here. It's just fear mongering or trying to make people afraid of what will happen if they don't get it. So down here at the bottom, they give you a little more information. Charged words or words with strong emotional connotations are used in emotional appeals to evoke in the audience a specific emotional reaction. So remember up here when I was talking about the word bleak, right? That's a more powerful sort of word that pushes like a more intense emotion than what you would normally get at a conversation. And people use those types of words in emotional appeals. It says the table shows a small sample of many of the charged words that exist. So there's a lot of them. This table only has a few. Note that what is considered a charged word changes constantly. What was not emotionally charged a decade ago might be now, or vice versa. Yes. So when you look at a word and you're trying to decide if it feels positive or negative, sometimes it's hard to tell. If you're a young person and you hear an old word that usually meant something good, but maybe the slang of it now is that it means something bad, right? There's no way for you to really know. You just kind of have to learn as you go along and see how other people use words. And then at the bottom here, it says, as with other emotional appeals, charged words should be used carefully in writing or speaking. Even though emotional appeals can be effective in swaying an audience opinion, these appeals should be used sparingly. All right, and that is the entirety of the article. Basically, the point of this is for you to understand the different types of logic that people can use, and when people are not using logic at all. If you were to read this statement, if you care about your children's success in school, you will invest in a set of encyclopedias. You should be asking questions. You should be asking questions about, is this true? How do you know it's true? How many students actually use these encyclopedias to pass assignments? How much information is in them? Like there should be questions. When people just say, oh, you should feel bad if you don't get your kids these encyclopedias, they're not going to do well in school. How do they know that? How do they know that? And that's the point of this knowledge article, for you to tell the difference between when people are trying to put together a logical argument and when people are just using your feelings to get you to side with them. Okay, now that we've made it past that part, we are going to actually head over to the reading selection for today. So the reading selection is Weary Pilgrim, Now at Rest. Let's see if we can head this way. Yes, As Weary Pilgrim, Now at Rest. So we get a little information here about the author, who is Anne Bradstreet. Hopefully, if you're here on this slide with me, you've actually gone through the tutorial already. If you need to take time to read through this and remind yourself of what's here before we go into the reading selection, please feel free. We are going to take some time to go over this reading selection. I'm going to pause when we see words that are unfamiliar. We're going to look them up in real time. That's usually how I do this in these videos, because I want to encourage students to actually look through and look up words while they are going through the material themselves. It's very important for you to be able to stop and look up vocabulary that you're unfamiliar with instead of just guessing. When you get to the mastery test, there's going to be questions about vocabulary. There's going to be questions about if these words are being used right. And there's going to be questions about what lines mean and what sections mean from the things that you've read. And it's important for you to be able to stop even in the middle of a mastery test and open up a new tab, make sure you know what a word means. Sometimes that's the difference between the question that'll give you the minimum passing score and you having to take the test over again. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to take a look at As Weary Pilgrim Now at Rest. I do want to warn you when we open this up, some of the language here is going to be very old school. It might be difficult for you to understand. Just take your time. That's the entire point of us going through it. Okay. So as weary, as means to be, so like to exist as, right? So as a is kind of what's implied here. So as weary pilgrim now at rest. Weary means to be tired. A lot of people remember the opening line from the Nevermore Edgar Allan Poe poem. Once upon a midnight dreary while I wander weak and weary. Weary means to be tired. So as weary pilgrim now at rest, hugs with delight his silent nest. So a nest is like a resting place, right? You think of like a nest where birds rest, right? They eat there, they sleep there. So they're connecting this idea of this tired pilgrim who is now at rest, being in the place where he belongs, his nest. Hugs with delight his silent nest. So they're explaining through like a metaphor, right? Hugs with delight. So you know what a hug is. Delight is to be very happy. The silent nest here, the place where you are resting, they're connecting this with the idea of like a grave, right? So they're saying a tired pilgrim now at rest. So they're saying this person was weary, exhausted, they were fatigued, they were tired. And now at rest, they mean like now he's dead. They sometimes call death the big sleep, the final rest. That's what they're referring to here. So as weary pilgrim now at rest, hugs with delight his silent nest. His wasted limbs now lie full soft, that miry steps have trodden oft. So wasted limbs, wasted means to also be like worn, like in a way that where like something's been worn down, it's damaged, right? So his wasted limbs now lie full soft. So they mean limp by soft. That's what she means. Full soft is like, so when you're laid back and you're resting, right? And your limbs, that's your arms and your legs, are just sort of limp, right? That's what they mean by full soft. And miry and oft, they give you the definition of these here. Miry is muddy and swampy, and oft is often, right? So that his wasted limbs now lie full soft, that miry steps have trodden oft. So they're talking about a person who had to work and move through swampy areas. And trodden oft is saying this is something that this person used to do often, that miry steps have trodden off. This is a person who had to walk often through that sort of swampy, muddy terrain. And now that he's dead, he can actually just rest and be limp. That's what these lines are saying. It says, let's go through this again, now that we know some things. As weary pilgrim now at rest, hugs with delight his silent nest. His wasted limbs now lie full soft, that miry steps have trodden off. Blesses him to think upon his dangers past and travails done. So travails is painful or difficult work. So now that he's at rest, he's blessed to think upon his dangers past and travails painful or difficult work done. So this whole section is just saying now that he's at rest, he's dead, he's had a life of working hard. Now he can finally take a chance to think about all of that work. The burning sun no more shall heat, nor stormy rains on him shall beat. So they're describing the weather and how it interacts with him. The briars, that's prickly plants, the briars and thorns shall no more scratch, nor hungry wolves at him shall catch. So they're just labeling things that this person had to deal with in his life, right? No burning sun, right? No being beat by the rain and having to do work in the rain. No thorny or difficult plants to scratch at his skin while he's going through like the forest or the underbrush. And no hungry wolves to chase or try to catch him. He erring paths no more shall tread, right? So erring is like when you get lost. Erring is to do something wrong or make a mistake. So no wrong paths should he tread. Tread means to travel. So they're saying he won't get lost or make a mistake and be on the wrong path anymore. Nor wild fruits eat instead of bread. So when you have to eat wild fruits instead of bread, basically what she's implying here is that when you get lost on these paths, right, these erring paths, these wrong paths, you have to eat wild fruit to survive if you are lost in the wilderness for a long time. So he doesn't have to do that anymore. And then it says, for water's cold, he doth not long. So when you long for something, you're wishing and hoping and praying for something. So if I'm longing for a good meal, that means I really, really, really want a good meal. So he's no longer wanting for cold water. For thirst no more shall parch his tongue. No rugged stones, rugged means rough. So no rugged stones, his feet shall gall. And gall is just to, like it says here, to irritate, right? So no more rough terrain like under his feet. Nor stumps nor rocks cause him to fall. All cares and fears he bids farewell. So cares are things you like, fears are things that you are afraid of. So he's saying goodbye to all those things. Bids farewell is to say goodbye. And means in safety now to dwell. So he's now in safety because he's dead. He doesn't have to worry about anything because he's dead now. A pilgrim I on earth perplexed, with sins, with cares and sorrows vexed. So this says a pilgrim I, right? So this means the person who's talking is now referring to themselves. So when this says, as weary pilgrim now at rest, hugs with delight his silent nest, right? So we're talking about some other pilgrim who's dead. That's what this whole section up until now has been about. And the person who wrote this, a pilgrim I, is reflecting on all of the things that this person doesn't have to suffer anymore because they're dead. So a pilgrim I on earth perplexed, with sins and cares and sorrows vexed. So to be vexed is to be annoyed or bothered. So this person is bothered with sins, that means wrongdoing, cares, things that they like, and sorrows, things that make them sad. So this person who's still alive, still on earth, right? On earth perplexed with sins and cares and sorrows vexed or annoyed by age and pains brought to decay. So they're saying that because they're still alive, they are moving closer to decay or dying. To decay is when something decomposes or suffers damage over time. And humans have to deal with pains and age that causes them to get older and die. And it says, and my clay house moldering away. Moldering just means rotting, right? And it says, oh, how I long to be at rest and soar on high among the blessed. So this person, the pilgrim I, is reflecting on how they still have to suffer because they are still alive, and this other person who suffered a lot is is dead and finally at rest. And then they're talking about the things they have to suffer, right? Sins, cares, sorrows, ages, and pains, and their house rotting away. Now, when they say house rotting away, that might be a little difficult to picture, but these pilgrims, remember, came over from Europe. So a lot of the homes that they have are like made from wood that they had to chop down. They built these houses themselves, and they're in a place that's unfamiliar to them. So that's why they're suffering from like the heat and the wolves, the briars. They're not in like a normal city. They had to build like cabin settlements where they were. And so their houses actually start rotting, you know, like after winter time and that kind of thing. So these are all things that pilgrims have to worry about. And then they finish with, oh, how I long to be at rest. Remember, long is to want deeply, right? So, oh, how I long to be at rest and soar on high among the blessed. So this person is saying they wish it was their time to die, so that they can be among the people who have done their time, who have lived their life, and who are in heaven, who can just reflect on their life. So I'm going to read through this one more time here at the top before we go to this second section. And this time I'm going to read it straight through without stopping for definitions, okay? As weary pilgrim now at rest, hugs with delight his silent nest. His wasted limbs now lie full soft that miry steps have trodden off, blesses himself to think upon his dangers past and travails done. The burning sun no more shall heat, nor stormy rains on him shall beat. The briars and thorns no more shall scratch, nor hungry wolves at him shall catch. He erring paths no more shall tread, nor wild fruits eat instead of bread. For water's cold he doth not long, for thirst no more shall parch his tongue. No rugged stones his feet shall gall, nor stumps nor rocks cause him to fall. All cares and fears he bids farewell, and means in safety now to dwell. A pilgrim I, on earth perplexed with sins and cares and sorrows vexed by age and pains brought to decay, and my clay house moldering away. Oh, how I long to be at rest and soar on high among the blessed. So now that we finished with that first stanza, I did want to double back really quickly. I think I skipped over this word. This is parched. So for thirst no more shall parch his tongue. Parch is to like quench. So if you're thirsty and you satisfy that by drinking water, that is what you're parching your thirst. That's what that means. Okay, so now we're in this second stanza. So we're not done yet. We're still here. This body shall in silence sleep. Mine eyes no more shall ever weep. No fainting fits shall me assail, nor grinding pains my body frail. Now, I feel like this is pretty easy to sort of get and understand, but we're going to go over it anyway, just in case. This body shall in silence sleep. So they're talking about the big sleep. They're talking about death. Remember, they're using the same word silence here as they had up here, right? His silent nest, right? They're using this word on purpose because at this point, silence and sleep, rest, all of these are words they're using to refer to death. So they're using sleep and silence on purpose to remind you of how they were used up here. So this person's now talking about what it will be like when they do die, right? My body shall means will. That's like the older language for will. So in the future, this body shall in silence sleep. Mine eyes no more shall ever weep. To weep is to cry. So this person's eyes will not cry anymore. No fainting fits shall me assail. Assail means to be attacked, usually physically, but sometimes verbally. So like if you've seen the word assault, assail is where that comes from. If you are assaulting someone, you are an assailant. Assailant is the person who is doing the attacking. So when this person says no fainting fits are episodes. Fits are episodes where you're fainting. No fainting fits shall me assail, so will attack this person, nor grinding pains my body frail. So their body's frail, and it says the pain will no longer grind their body, right? With cares and fears ne'er cumbered be. So encumbered means to be burdened or weighed down. So they won't be weighed down with cares or fears anymore. Nor losses know, nor sorrows see. So losses is to lose something, so they won't know what it's like to lose anything else after they're dead, and they won't see anything sad. Sorrows is sad, right? So what though my flesh shall there consume? It is the bed Christ did perfume. So it says, what though my flesh shall there consume? So after death, what their flesh is going to consume, what they're going to take into their body after death, will be the bed of Christ. It is the bed of Christ did perfume. So that's like a nice smelling bed. They're saying the only thing that I'm going to have in this body, on this body, will be a bed of Christ. And when a few years shall be gone, this mortal shall be clothed upon. A corrupt carcass down it lays, a glorious body it shall rise. So here's what it's saying. And when a few years shall be gone, so in a few years, when a few years shall be gone, when a few years have passed. So because when something is past, it's come and gone, right? So that's what they mean when they say shall be gone. When a few years pass, right? This mortal as in like a person, a human, someone who can die, right? A mortal shall be clothed upon. So they're referring to the clothing that people put on dead bodies. There's a special dressing. Even in funerals today, we want people to look good, like in their caskets before they get buried. So it's the same thing here they're referencing. This mortal shall be clothed upon. A corrupt carcass down it lays. So here, this is a reference to the biblical story of Jesus rising from the dead. So a corrupt carcass down it lays, a glorious body it shall rise. So they're just referring to Jesus, who was put into a tomb, and he was considered corrupt at the time that his body was laid to rest, because of the way that he was crucified and took on the sins of humanity. So this person is comparing themselves in the same way. They're saying they're gonna, since they've taken on the sins and pains from their life, they're gonna lay down a corrupt carcass. A carcass is a dead body, and rise a glorious body. In weakness and in dishonor sown. So to sow something or to sow something is to plant a seed. So they're referring to their humanity, right? So they're saying humans originate from sin, weakness, and dishonor. They're saying as someone who started off that way, empowered, 'tis raised by Christ alone. And 'tis is just it is. So they're saying that their glorious body, after being like a weak and sinful human, will be raised in power by Jesus Christ. Remember, these people are very religious. Then soul and body shall unite, and of their maker have the sight. Right? So they're talking about just other religious beliefs. Some people, and especially the Pilgrims, Protestants, believe that the body and soul were reborn upon death and reunited. And of their maker have the sight. So be able to see, sight is to see their maker. So they're talking about God here. Such lasting joys shall there behold, as ear never heard nor tongue never told. So they're saying they're going to behold or experience, see or hold lasting joys that no other human, no ear, I mean like physical ear, nor tongue ever told. So they're going to see something so great, the everlasting joy that no human while alive has experienced, to hear or to tell about. Lord, make me ready for that day. Then come, dear bridegroom, come away. So bridegroom is like the formal word for a groom, right? So when you have the bride and groom in a wedding, bride is definitely the wife, but bridegroom is the name of the male. So here in religious speech, bridegroom of the church is considered like Jesus Christ. The reason why this is because he's the the liaison between God and the people who are practicing the religion. So he's considered bridegroom, connection, spouse, the person who is attached to or married to the church, because he's the path that people have to go through to get to heaven, right? So I'm just explaining the reference. That's who they're referencing here. The bridegroom, they're referencing Jesus. So now we're going to read through all of this again. I won't start at the top. We'll just do the second paragraph all the way through now that we've gone through the different words and what they mean. This body shall in silence sleep. Mine eyes no more shall ever weep, nor fainting fits shall me assail, nor grinding pains my body frail. With cares and fears ne'er cumbered be, nor losses know, nor sorrows see. What though my flesh shall there consume, it is the bed Christ did perfume, and when a few years shall be gone, this mortal shall be clothed upon. A corrupt carcass down it lays, a glorious body it shall rise, in weakness and dishonor sown, empowered 'tis raised by Christ alone. Then soul and body shall unite, and of their maker have the sight such lasting joys shall there be told. Behold, as ear ne'er heard, nor tongue e'er told. Lord, make me ready for that day, that come, dear bridegroom, come away. So this entire poem is about how hard the pilgrims have to work at how they are suffering in the colonies, that they've made it in their settlements because they're in an unfamiliar land. They've got to survive on their own through really bad conditions. And this poet is reflecting on how satisfied they imagine they are going to feel once their death comes, because they've had a hard life where they've had to do nothing but work hard and face danger. And they're talking about the peace that they feel, other people feel, and that they think they will feel by the time their life is done. So we're going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to click over to slide 11, where there's some analysis, right? So in this analysis, the details of this poem gives modern readers a way to decipher what Bradstreet's purpose might have been. And then they tell you what it is, namely to express envy of a pilgrim who has died and now lies at rest. So that's what we were talking about before. Envy means that you want something that someone else has, beyond earthly pains. So the poem is unofficially split into two sections, one in which the speaker discusses the pains, and we went through that, the sun, the storm, the wolves, right? The deceased pilgrim will no longer bear, and one in which she addresses her own desires, that means longing, want, remember, for such rest. So in these lines, Bradstreet shows the speaker's wish is to be relieved of hardship on earth and live with God in heaven. So I won't read through this because we literally just read it. But this was from the first stanza, where we're talking about not having to worry about being lost or eating wild fruits or needing water, being thirsty, rough stones on his feet, right? And this is the raw version of the text. So this is the old spelling of Gaul, for example. They changed it to modern English in the excerpt that we have. And then here on slide 12, we get one more last section, right? Bradstreet's speaker seems to long for the enlightened peace of death, as the pilgrim has already experienced. So based on the hardships that the poet faced in her life, religious persecution, that means people going after you because of your religious beliefs, and struggles to survive and raise a family in a harsh new land, Bradstreet may have been expressing her own desires as a Puritan pilgrim. Just as the pilgrim hugs with delight his silent nest, his final resting place, so too does the speaker wish for an end to their earthly problems. And then instead, she writes that she can only hope for those kind of pleasures. And again, I won't read through this because we just went through the poem, but take your time, while you're going through this. As Weary Pilgrim Now at Rest demonstrates the religious convictions that colonists felt in the early days of the American colonies. And this poem illustrates how faith aided the settlers as they adapted to their desolate and arduous new homeland. That's an important point that needs to be brought up with this poem as well. Yes, the pilgrims suffered a lot, But it's important to note that even though they suffered, they were still loyal to their religion and they were looking forward to the rest that they felt they earned. Remember near the end where they were talking about their corrupted carcass? They truly believed that humans were born sinful and evil and bad, and that working hard the way that they do their whole lives in this poem, at least as pilgrims, is what helps them earn their right to rest and to be with God in heaven after they die. So even though they're suffering, they still believe in their faith that they're going to be rewarded. And that's very important because most people who are going through that sort of thing would instead, like wonder what it is they did in life that was really awful, or they might even start to question their faith if they feel like they haven't done anything to deserve that sort of suffering. But the Pilgrims and Bradstreet specifically just took it in stride and just figured like, oh, well, humans are sinful creatures. We're awful. So we're getting all the things that we deserve in this life. It's trying to survive so that I can get to heaven that's most important. And even while she's envious of someone dying, she's still very loyal to her religion. And that's important to keep in mind while reading this poem and looking back on it. Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing because that's about it for this lesson. It was kind of long because of the knowledge section at the beginning. I just feel it's important to go over that. Obviously, this poem was very, very emotional. There are some facts that were here. Like I think that when a person is writing about the experiences of hardships, they're probably drawing from things that actually are true. They want you to understand the emotions that they are going through and that other people have experienced. And we're going to get into the knowledge article again with the next video. The next excerpt that we're going to be reading will be Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. I'll be going over the knowledge article one more time in that video because I don't think this student should have to go back and forth from one video to the next. So feel free to join me for the next video. If you need help understanding things, if that review did not help you with this poem at all, please feel free to sign up for tutoring, contact your advocate or your teacher mentor. Contact me, Miss Amber, contact any of the other tutors if you have the tutoring doc. If you don't, make sure you get your hands on it by talking to your teacher or advocate. But as for now, this is Miss Amber signing off, and good luck with the rest of your English class.